Some betrayals cut deeper than others. It isn't the edge of the blade that lingers but the place it's buried, the quiet of the wound. The way the skin refuses to close when the hands that did the harm are the same hands that once braided hair and borrowed sweaters in a sunlit bedroom of childhood. At 38, with a husband of 10 years, Kenny, who still sleeps curled like a question mark, and two small children who smell like rain and warm milk, life had arranged itself into a stack of gentle, predictable hours. Stability isn't glamour, but it has a sound. The tick of the kitchen clock between Dan's chatter about preschool and Jen's humming as she drags her blanket across the tile. The sound was enough until the night Mia walked in late and decided the room wasn't bright enough without her setting it on fire. It was our parents' 40th anniversary, the kind of evening that wears its own light, glassy, golden, fragile as the rim of a champagne flute. The dining room smelled of lemon oil and roast garlic, of the Lily's mom cut too short and arranged anyway, laughing when their faces bobbed like tipsy guests. We started the toast without Mia because the cousins were restless, because the cork had already tripped like a startled bird, because Dad was blinking fast, and if he blinked any faster the tears would spill into his jokes. I thought she'll forgive us when she walks in, sees the people who love her, remembers that love can wait and still be love. She did not. Mia arrived with the cold, bringing the breath of the late November street inside with her, shoulder peeking from an ill-tempered dress, hair set into a dark sheet that fell like a curtain for a show only she was ready to start. "Really? You couldn't wait for me?" she said, just loud enough to scatter the hush like pigeons, and a dozen heads rose as if pulled by a string. Mom tried humor. "Sweetheart, at our age, we can't wait for anything, not even dessert." But the laugh came out flimsy, and Mia pressed her lips into a line that meant she was storing the slight in a shelf where she kept such things polished. We sat. The table flamed with candles biting into their wicks and little glass bowls of olives that Dan fished like treasures with his fingers. He is 4, and at 4, wonder is a job you work full-time. His cheeks shone, his eyes like little wet marbles as he told the story of the classroom turtle, of his friend Levi who could sing the alphabet backward, of his girlfriend, Nora, who once gave him a sticker that smelled like strawberries. Laughter loosened the room, true, round, communal, and it curled around Dan like a scarf someone knits without measuring by the person who will wear it. Mia tried in the beginning to be part of that warmth. She joined, then adjusted, then rerouted. She is a woman who thinks attention is oxygen, and she always believes she is the one drowning. She talked about Capri, about a hotel room with a balcony that was basically above God, about a waiter named Paolo who wrote poetry on receipts, about the wine that tasted like violets, like the color violet itself. No one bit because Dan was talking about how Nora had a Band-Aid with tiny panda faces, and how he had wanted to lick it, but his teacher said that was not a good idea. Sometimes jealousy is loud and operatic. Sometimes it is small enough to fit behind the glint on a fork's prong. Mia's gaze slid to me like a cat's paw under a door, busy, secretive, curious only for the sake of the trouble it might find. She leaned toward her husband, a tilt of shoulder that was really a hinge on a trapdoor, and said, with the calculated softness of someone who wants to be overheard, "Their smiles will fade once the truth about Dan's father comes out." The room didn't go silent so much as stop breathing. We all held the same lungful of air and waited to see if the ceiling might fall. Kenny's fork hovered, a small silver flag in a wind that didn't exist a moment ago. "What's that supposed to mean?" he asked, voice tight, wary, a man who has heard thunder in a blue sky. Mia put on a face she keeps around for emergencies, the one that says, "Oh dear, my foot slipped into my mouth again. How clumsy, how me." "Did I say that out loud?" she asked. Innocence pearled on every word like beads on a cheap dress, shining until you touch them and they flake. "What truth?" I asked, and felt my own voice like a wire pulled taut between us, humming with a current I could neither see nor stop. Mia sat back, savoring the weight of a room pressing toward her. She rolled the moment on her tongue the way she rolling pins stories into the shapes she prefers. "Come on," she said. "Look at him. Black hair, neither of you have it, but your ex did, didn't he? She did not say his name, and that was worse, because my past became a creature under the table, brushing our shins. Anger doesn't redden me. It hollows me out first, a scoop taken from the center where the heat burns, so that when my words come they ring as if inside a vessel, bright and brittle. Do you not understand genetics? I said, and my father's hand made a small gesture, please, please, but I had stepped too far into the dark to know where the edge had been. My father has black hair, Kenny's cousins do. How dare you insinuate otherwise? The knives of my sentences landed in the cloth between us, and still she smiled. Relax. It's a joke, she said, which is what people say when they have swung and missed the human heart. If you're so sure, take a paternity test. Settle it. It wasn't the words. It was the smirk, the way her mouth held the shape of victory over a battle she hadn't fought. I stood up and felt the room drop away like a trapdoor, my hands buzzing, the blood in my temples drumming the first measures of a song I didn't know. If you don't take it back, I said low, and Mia rolled her eyes the way she rolls bluster into armor. Don't be dramatic, she replied. Don't be such a baby. I gathered my children, holy sleeping creatures who trust the dark because they have not yet learned it is only light in a different suit, and left. Kenny followed with that terrible quiet men where when they don't know which part of the house is burning. The ride home was peopled by ghosts of things we didn't say. Streetlights made the car into a flicker book of faces. Kenny's profile in warm amber, then gray, then gone. I wanted him to turn to me and say, I know, the way a priest says, you are forgiven, with no ask, no paperwork, no proof. He did not. When the door clicked and the house inhaled us back into its ribs, he put his keys in the bowl and went to bed without changing, an exhausted astronaut who removes nothing, even the helmet, in case the air here is no longer safe. I sat at the kitchen table where the wood remembers every homework scratch and coffee ring and pressed my palm flat until my hand stung. The clock said something. The fridge made its wet metallic swallow. The night grew thick as a blanket pulled too high, and I could not kick free. The next evening, I asked the question that had grown a spine and teeth and was gnawing through the soft parts. Do you trust me? Kenny rubbed the back of his neck, a habit that is less a gesture than a map to where his doubts hide. Of course, he said, which is the kind of answer that tells you nothing about the forest inside a man and everything about the weather he does not want to name. Then why didn't you say anything? He sighed, and something in it scraped the bottom of the glass. It's not that I believe her, he began, and my heart braced for the fall, but the way you reacted, it got me thinking. If it's all nonsense, why get so defensive? The room didn't tilt, it narrowed, and I felt like someone trying to turn around in a hallway where the paint is still wet. Because she accused me of cheating on you, I said, and the word cheating tasted like rust. In front of our family. He nodded as if agreement were a salve, but in his eyes a small seed turned its coat inside out and began to grow in the dark. Here is what Mia would tell you if she were the narrator. That she is the middle of a stage no one acknowledges, that the light that falls on me is a theft, that every room offers me a chair and offers her a test. She believes, truly, that I am the golden child because it is easier than believing I worked until my hands knew no other language than doing. Her jealousy is an organ. It feeds and bleeds and insists on its own survival. But this whisper with teeth, wasn't just hunger, it was a hunt. In the weeks after, days moved the way a song does when someone drags a finger along the record and slows it to a moan. We argued in the quiet ways first, doors side closed, silverware a little louder in the drawer, the whoosh of a shower that should have been an invitation and became a doorbell no one answered. Dan asked if Nora knew how to whistle. Jen fell asleep with her eyelashes stuck together like wet ferns. The house kept being a house as if nothing inside it had been rearranged, as if furniture weren't missing one leg each. When Kenny finally said, "Why don't we just take a paternity test?" It came out gentle, like a doctor asking about pain on a scale of 1 to 10. I laughed, not because it was funny, but because laughter is sometimes the only way to keep the scream from breaking the dishes. You want me to validate a lie to ease your paranoia? I asked. Do you realize you're letting her win? We were past the quiet arguments then. We were loud enough that the children learned to narrate our storm in small voices to grandparents on the phone. Mom and Dad are in their room, Dan said once, earnest as weather. They're fighting. I swallowed my pride because pride is bright but not edible. We took the test. It came back what I already knew, what my body knows the way a tree knows its own roots even when the ground is cold. Dan is Kenny's son. Kenny apologized with his whole face, with the slump of his shoulders, with the tremble in his hand when he reached for mine. But apologies do not rewind. They smooth if you let them, and some days the cloth refuses to lie flat. Then my mother called, voice raw on the underside. She admitted it, Mom said, meaning Mia, meaning the machine that eats attention and spits out glass. She said she did it to stir trouble. She's tired of our family obsessing over your perfect life. The words landed and did not shatter. They burrowed like nails set with quiet taps, a frame I knew I would hang something heavy on. I will ruin her, I said. I had never said such a thing and meant it, but meaning arrived like a coat that finally fit. The line between restraint and revenge is thin as fishing line, and somewhere my finger had slid across and felt the cut, and the blood was both a warning and a proof that I was still alive. That night, after Kenny slept, I opened a door I had told myself did not exist. There is a way into anyone who believes the internet is a confessional with no priest and no memory. There is always a seam. I found her in groups that smell like perfume and smoke and secrecy, spaces where people teach each other how to make disaster look like adventure. I read Mia's words, backup plan. How to hide the hotel charge. Never use the same alias twice, and a part of me that used to beg for her love fell silent forever. Screenshots went into a folder named after something innocent, recipes, and then my finger hovered over the trackpad like a bird considering a wire that might be live. Revenge is a bridge with signs on either end warning about weight limits. Still, you cross, because the person on the other side has set fire to your house, and your children are asleep upstairs. I slept badly, which is to say I dreamed with my eyes open. 2 days later, Mom said, she's pregnant. It wasn't joy she said it with. It was the tone of a nurse reading a chart that has more red than black. High risk. The folder named recipes brightened on my laptop like a lighthouse, like a dare. Kenny stood in the doorway with the soft stubbornness he brings to all almost lost causes. Don't, he said. Not now, not like this. He believed that a baby is a truce you don't break. He believed harm wouldn't stop at Mia. I wanted to believe it, too, and I wanted the world to be built such that a woman like my sister could not walk into a room full of our life and make the walls move. So I waited. Waiting, it turns out, is its own kind of violence, quiet as snow on the edge of a roof. I waited and watched the calendar molt and thought of the first day of our marriage, how Mia had to be locked in a room to sober up, how she'd told me, once, half confession, half curse, that she hated being the side character in a family that insisted she was loved. I waited, holding a handful of matches, telling myself they were only for light. After the papers were filed and the neighborhood's concern cooled into casserole and polite nods, the house began to speak in small, domestic dialects again. Washer thumps, spoon and mug chimes, the soft complaint of the back door when the afternoon heat swelled the wood. Ordinary returned like a stray that had once bitten and now wanted only a blanket by the radiator. It approached slowly, head down, waiting to see if it was still welcome. Ordinary is underrated, a quiet revolution. It takes a battered room and teaches it to breathe on rhythm again. Some evenings, standing barefoot at the sink, listening to the water's silver hiss, there was gratitude so simple it felt like a clean sheet laid over a bed that had seen too much. Kenny and the children relearned the choreography of the kitchen, the way we used to brush past each other at the island, trading spatulas and kisses, swapping jokes and chores. Dan introduced new rules to dinosaur politics. No roaring before breakfast, treaties sealed with gummy bears. And Jen insisted the moon was a bowl of milk somebody drank slowly in the night, leaving a ring on the dark sky. Their certainty was a balm, a reminder that truth at 4 and 2 is an earnest animal with bright eyes and sticky fingers. In their sentences, the world was salvageable. In their sleep-tangled hair, the future remembered how to look like a promise. Kenny and I, though, moved with a carefulness we hadn't needed before, like dancers returning after an injury, each step a test and a prayer. We saw a therapist with a soft voice and a jungle of plants that made the office feel like somewhere oxygen went to retire. She handed us words that felt like tools instead of weapons. Doubt, she said, is a visitor. It knocks. It presses its face to the window. It looks like someone familiar wearing the wrong coat. You don't have to let it unpack. Hurt, she said, isn't a verdict. It's a signal. Name it, and it might stop trying to speak with its hands. We practiced saying that hurt, and then shutting up long enough to hear the echo, not filling the space with defenses or spreadsheets of proof. It's strange how much work it is to learn to say a simple sentence and mean only what it says. If trust is a house, we went room to room with buckets and rags. We threw out furniture that looked expensive but had always been uncomfortable. Assumptions, shortcuts, the habit of hoping the other would read our minds. We put new paint on the walls, rituals that meant something because we said they did. Kenny took the early morning shift so I could sleep in the softest hour. I banned phones from the table with a decisive flick, like cutting a string and watching a bad puppet slump. In a drawer, the paternity envelope lived like a fossil, not a threat. Proof of a creature that had occupied our home, now extinct, its bones arranged carefully under glass so we could remember without letting it roam. My parents practiced their own peculiar grief. They kept the baby's photo on the mantel in a frame too large, as if enlarging the border might teach the picture to hold more of what had been broken. My mother wrote me messages that started with weather, windy today, and ended with apology without ever using the word. My father, who believed in fixing more than forgiving because he trusted hammers more than hearts, installed a new latch on their back gate and didn't mention Mia by name. When they visited her apartment, they came back quiet, as if the hallways there were full of people who had seen them cry and were now lodged like coals in their throats. They learned the baby's schedule the way one learns a prayer, by repetition, by the bright, stubborn hope that saying it correctly might change what it asks for. Mia texted from unfamiliar numbers the way weather changes on a lake: sun, wind, sudden squall. "Can we talk? I miss my sister," came first, sugar dusted on top of glass. Then when I didn't reply, "You're cruel, and you did this." And family is family, the last like a law passed long ago that she believed should still govern a country no one wanted to live in. The therapist had asked me, early, a question I had avoided because of how clean it was. What does forgiveness look like that doesn't include access? That line became my small, strong boat. I texted, "I hope you're well. I can't be in contact right now." The right now did the work of mercy without promising a future I didn't know how to build. When the escalation came, I blocked. There is a holiness in the ordinary act of preventing harm. It isn't dramatic. It's a boundary drawn in chalk and blessed with the authority of stepping back. At night, when the house stilled into the kind of quiet that has its own gravity, I would sometimes take the long path of memory and end up in rooms I'd locked. My wedding day, where I laughed and then cried and then laughed again as cousins carried Mia, drunk and furious, into a bedroom to sober up. The childhood kitchen where she once admitted, chin lifted like a dare, "I hate being the side character," and I had reached for her hand, thinking I could rewrite a script by loving harder. There's a peculiar arithmetic to family. We believe if we give more, carry more, absorb more, the sum will even out. It doesn't. It only hides the deficit until the bill arrives with interest and a cruelly itemized list. The answer, I was learning, isn't more. The answer is different. The baby's name came in a group text my mother sent like a town crier who had replaced her bell with a smartphone. I said the name aloud in the kitchen, felt it sit in the air like a seed. Dan asked if we could give the baby a dinosaur when he turned 5, because that's when people are brave. I said yes because it felt like a blessing disguised as a plan. That night I lit a candle at the sink, not for religion but for attention, that modest act of making flame and asking it to mean what it has always meant. Here is warmth, here is light, here is danger made small and useful. Summer lifted the smell of cut grass into the street. The maple threw polite shade. We went to my in-laws on Sundays and left heavy with leftovers and benign gossip. Kenny's mother touched my cheek in the doorway and said, "You look rested," which was her way of saying, "I see you surviving." Back home, we built a tent out of sheets in the living room and let the children say terrible, perfect things like, "The dark is just secret light," and "When I grow up, I want to be a window." Kenny crawled in and fell asleep with one arm flung over his eyes, as if even dreams were too bright to consider unfiltered. I watched his chest rise and fall and felt the odd, gorgeous ache of staying. Sometimes the past reached for me like a coat sleeve catching on a door handle. A photo would surface, Mia at 17 in my sweater, chin tucked, eyes vast. Mia at 28 with a haircut I liked and a laugh that looked unpracticed, and my throat would go tight with the memory of who we almost were. I let the ache arrive and leave without assigning it homework. This, too, was a boundary, permission for feeling without the obligation of fixing. On a Tuesday, I wrote a letter I didn't send, the kind therapists recommend. It was a map of what I could carry and what I could not, of the bridge I had set on fire and the river I would meet downstream, on my bank, if she ever learned how to arrive without torch in hand. I folded it and put it in the drawer with the fossil envelope, artifacts of storms. One night, thunder stitched the sky close and the power clicked out. The house exhaled. The children woke, small sirens calling from dark rooms. We gathered on the couch under a quilt that smelled faintly of cedar and old summer. Kenny told a story about a knight whose only sword was a good question and whose shield was a promise kept. Dan demanded a dragon. Jen wanted the moon bowl to spill. We made do. The dragon learned to roast bread, the moon tipped a little, and the bowl filled a creek that found the sea. When the lights returned, the room looked briefly unfamiliar, like the face of a friend you haven't seen cry and then have. I thought, this is what resolution is, not the absence of weather but a roof that holds. The next morning I saw Mia on the opposite sidewalk. She was pushing a stroller, sunglasses too large, hair a flag with no country. For a second the world narrowed to a thread between us, and all the years tugged. She raised a hand that wasn't quite a wave. I put my palm to my chest in acknowledgement and did not cross. The gesture felt like laying down a heavy thing without dropping it. She turned the corner. I turned toward home. It was anticlimax if a person prefers fireworks. It was mercy if a person has learned the cost of sparks. Later that week, my parents came for dinner. My father admired the new latch Kenny had installed on the back gate and then, after studying the hardware like a parable, cleared his throat. "Holds better," he said. "The old one never sat right." My mother brought a pie she hadn't baked, store-bought forgiveness, and we ate it anyway because sweetness is sometimes just something you accept. After the children collapsed in a nest of pillows, we moved to the porch. Crickets did the work of an orchestra. My mother squeezed my hand. "Thank you," she said. "It wasn't for the pie. It wasn't for coming to the shower. It wasn't for anything specific. It was, I think, for surviving in a way that didn't demand a witness." The last of Mia's messages, the ones from numbers I didn't recognize, stopped arriving. The silence wasn't victory. It was a field left fallow by choice. We planted small things in it: Saturday pancakes, postcards taped to the fridge from places we could afford to go, Dan's lopsided drawing of a happy dragon, Jen's sun with too many rays and a smile that split its own light. We watered what we wanted to keep. We pruned what reached where it shouldn't. We learned to say, when the old ache came knocking, "Not today," and sometimes, honestly, not ever. On an evening that smelled of tomatoes and dust, Kenny stood at the sink, forearms wet to the elbow, sleeves rolled, and looked at me like a man who had walked a long way and still wanted the next mile if I was the road. "We're okay," he said, not as a question, not as bravado, but as observation. I nodded. "We're okay," I said back, and the words landed gently, like a bird that had learned where the branch bends and where it holds. Beyond the window, clouds shouldered each other for the last light, and a wind came through the maple with a sound like a promise being made carefully. We didn't seal anything with oaths or ink. We closed the dishwasher. We turned off the porch light. We climbed the stairs together, choosing, again, the ordinary miracle. And the ordinary miracle.